And now we are excited to welcome here in our studio our next guest speaker and Foreign Press Honorary Awardee, Fran Lebowitz. Fran Lebowitz is an American author, journalist, and social observer. She is known for her sardonic social commentary on American life as filtered through her New York City sensibilities. The New York Times has called her modern-day Dorothy Parker. She is known for her books Metropolitan Life, 1978, and Social Studies, 1981, which were combined into the Fran Lebowitz Reader in 1994. She has been the subject of two projects directed by Martin Scorsese, the HBO documentary film Public Speaking, and most recently, the Netflix docuseries Pretend It's a City. From what I see, our executive director, Thanos Dimadis, and Fran Lebowitz have already taken their seats in our studio. On behalf of Association of Foreign Press Correspondents, congratulations, Fran Lebowitz, for being the Honorary Foreign Press Awardee for 2021. Thanos, we now come to you.
It's a pleasure, it's an honor, a privilege to be here with you today. Thank you on behalf of the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents for being with us, for accepting our honorary award, the Foreign Press Honorary Award this year. And my first question for all those watching us is, the award is a recognition. Most people, do you agree that they don't understand what has been behind to reach the point of getting an award? There is a lot of hard work, probably a lot of years of disappointments, failures, successes. I would like to hear from you a little bit of the story, the background story of how a person can reach out this level, the point that you are today.
I have to tell you, this is the second award I've ever received in my life, and the first one was like 2 weeks ago. So, and the first one was an Italian award for satire, and the guy I talked to from the organization told me, this is a Lifetime Achievement Award. I said, what? He said, yes. I said, well, here's what you have to understand. Usually when you get a Lifetime Achievement Award, it's preceded by many other awards. This is the first award I ever got, all right? There was this Lifetime Achievement Award. So maybe my life's gonna go backwards, and in 25 years, I'll graduate from high school. So this is the second award. So to me, what this shows really is what I've been saying to my friends for a few years. This is the era of the old lady. You know, that's what it has to be. You know, everyone decided finally, you know who we like? Old ladies. I mean, of course the world prefers dead women, but you know, next to dead, old is better. So I really believe that, you know, when I was young, you know, my first book came out when I was 27. There was an award I should have gotten then, in my opinion. I didn't get anything. So, you know, I mean, of course the world has changed immensely in that amount of time, but it's changed in that direction. I now know that young women also get things, but you know, it's too late for me to get something young, so I'm happy to get it old.
So you think that if you were in this era today and you were younger, in your 20s, do you think that you could have more possibilities, more opportunities to be recognized earlier, like at that level?
Because no question. I mean, you know, my first book was a big hit, you know, great reviews and stuff like that, but I didn't get any awards, you know.
Do you think that there was a little bit of discrimination?
No, a lot.
A lot?
Not a little bit, okay? A lot. I mean, one of the things that, I mean, a lot of things have deteriorated in my lifetime, but one of the things that has improved immensely is the position of women. I mean, it's not good, but it is so much better. You know, I mean, it's better in some places than others. This was always the case. But no, yes, of course, it's much better. You know. So
you would like to be in your 20s today, and what would you do differently if you were in your 20s?
I'd buy an apartment. That's the main thing. It's not a question whether I would like to be in my 20s now. You know, I mean, lots of people, of course, people who are younger than me, which is pretty much everyone now, ask me all the time. You know, kids come up to me in the street for the past 10 years at least. And when I say kids, I mean people in their 20s, asking, you know, saying to me, oh, I wish I lived in New York in the 70s. It looked so much fun, you know. And this, in a certain way, is quite disturbing because I believe that nostalgia is an incredibly poisonous, you know, emotion or, you know, sensibility. Nostalgia for something you never lived through is kind of crazy. But I also know that when I was in my 20s, I didn't go up to people in the street saying, I wish I lived in New York in my 30s, you know. But the reason for that, I don't think it has anything to do with me. I think it has to do with the fact that the 70s in New York has now achieved this kind of worldwide, you know, position the way like Paris in the 20s. You know, there's some eras that are just seem very glamorous to people. So I have spent a lot of time in the last several years trying to determine whether I think something was better because it was actually better, or because it's just simply better to be in your 20s than in your 60s or 70s. It's more fun, by which I mean, no, it's just better. So, you know, I would say that of course, any person would rather be in their 20s than 70. But since every person can only be in their 20s once, truthfully, I'm glad I was in my 20s then. Because, you know, the worse the world looks to me, the more you think, well, whenever these cataclysmic things are supposed to happen, you know, in 30 years there'll be no water. At first, when I hear this, I always think, oh my God, then I realize you'll be dead. You know, don't worry about there no water, but they should worry about it, you know. So I think it's a very, I mean, it did seem, you know, when I was young, that it didn't seem so dire, the future, as it seems now. You know, I hope that these predictions are wrong, you know, but even if I'm not here, but I mean, things are pretty bad worldwide. It's not like there's one country where you think, why don't we have that president? There's no place in the world where I think they have a fantastic government. You know, democracies across the world are in a lot of trouble.
Do you think that the younger generation of people, of young professionals who are now in their 20s, 30s, they're trying to set up their lives, do you think that they have the same prospect of hope that you had at that age?
No, I don't, because I mean, I don't know how they feel. You know, how other people feel, I only know what they tell me. You know, so I mean, half the time I don't know how I feel.
You speak with a lot of people, younger.
Yes, I mean, one of the big differences is, and this may be just true of me as opposed to everyone my age. I never thought about the future in that way when I was young. I mean, first of all, I was not. They're very much more organized than I was, and in fact, that most people my age were. You know, they're really organized. At a very young age, they said, I want to go to this school, I want to get this job, I want to live in this place, I want to make this much money, I want to marry this person. They're used to ordering things in a very specific way. This was not true of me. I mean, at all. So I never really thought about it. It just never occurred to me. I think that because when you do that, which everyone does now, then you can very easily fail. In other words, because this stuff is made up. The future is a fantasy for everybody. I don't care how you prepare. You know, no one knows the future. So when people ask me all the time, we also now have, at least in this country, you know, hundreds, thousands of people whose profession is predicting the future. You know, they're almost all wrong all the time. And I always say when people tell me something like that, if you really know the future, buy a lottery ticket. You know, and then you have to worry about this stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't look swell to me. But if I was, it's also the question, if you were young now, is an impossible one to answer. Because, I'm sorry, there's no context for me being young now. If I was young now, I would be a completely different person.
In what way?
In every possible way. You know,
I would, now what you just said brings me to my next question on what would you have done differently? Like 3 major things that you would have done different, except for the apartment that you had bought an apartment. Other 3 major things that you would change. I
think I would have been better off noticing so that some of the things that happened to me or some of the obstacles I encountered were not about me. They were about, for instance, being a woman, which I never thought about. You know, they were about being gay, you know, which I did know about, you know. So there were, when I say I took everything personally, I don't mean in a tragic way, but I thought, you have to do this. This isn't working, you have to do that. And I just thought of like, you know, that this was me, not this was the forces of the society against me. In a way, I think that's good. And there were certain things I just skipped. Okay, for instance, you know, feminism as a form of activism, you know, was starting in the 70s, And I never was involved with it. And it wasn't that I thought they were wrong, it's that I thought this is never going to work. And it really hasn't worked very well, by the way. It worked better than I thought it would, but it didn't really work. The same thing with gay rights. They were starting this stuff, and I thought, are you crazy? This is never going to work. The extent to which that worked, is unimaginable, really unimaginable. The one thing that I was involved with was, the protests against the Vietnam War. That did seem to work, but of course, in retrospect, I see why. It had something to do with the fact they were marching and stuff like that. But that is an incident as opposed to something, that is in the fabric of the culture.
Let's talk a little bit about journalism, disinformation. Do you think that it is a real threat in our society, the disinformation aspect of how the new technology and online digital information tools have been spreading this misinformation? And do you think that journalism can save a little bit of the historical truth of what is happening around us for the future generations?
It's the most dangerous thing in the culture. Before the internet, from a point of view of journalism, when journalism was newspapers, radio, television, especially here, there was no argument that was not settled by the person saying, if you said, why do you think that? And they say, it was in the New York Times. That was the end of any argument. The New York Times was like the authority of the entire country. So, and of course they had mistakes, but not the kind of mistakes you see now. So I think that it's a better thing that there are, venues, or publications or something that everyone agrees. No one argued. No one said, the New York Times is wrong. There's not really a war in Vietnam. There was nothing like, I suppose there were still some lunatics, with conspiracy theory. There were people who didn't think that the United States, sent a man to the moon, but it was like 2 people, not half the country. So it's very dangerous, this stuff now. It's extremely dangerous. It's the most dangerous thing there is.
What do you think that make up success for a person, for a professional, for a journalist, based on all of your wisdom that you accumulated over the years? You carry wisdom, and that's why people like to hear you. It's not because you are only provocative and you have views that are opposed to the common sense sometimes, or the basic common logic. It's because you carry wisdom, and I think that in our age, in our era, it is important to have people who bring wisdom in this landscape of disinformation and, easily consuming stuff.
It's only because when you're old, you remember things. I at least remember. Some old people don't. There are people even older than me. Not in the room, of course. But, until COVID, every single after a certain age, I don't know what age that would be, but like say your 40s or something like that, no matter what happened, it would remind you of something else. That's what looks like wisdom to people. Like, this is, you may not even say, this is kind of like that, so this would happen. COVID was not like anything that ever happened in my lifetime. There was no analogy to it. It did not remind me of anything, and hence I did not know how to think about it. When it first happened, when I first kind of realized it was, what was happening, the first thing I realized after that was, I don't know how to think about this. Not that I don't know how to feel about it. Also, most people, at least in this country, say think when they mean feel. So I know the difference between feel and think. That's a very important distinction, I think. So Toni Morrison, who was a very close friend of mine, as soon as this happened, I said to the guy who was my editor and her editor and a close friend of both of us, I said, I miss Toni every day, but don't you miss her right now the most? He said, yes. I said, because we don't know how to think about this. And even though Toni, who was quite a bit older than me, wasn't so old that she remembered the 1918 flu epidemic, she still would have, I could have said, Toni, how do you think about this? Not, what do you think about this? What's the best way to think about this? And if anyone would have known, she would have known. So by the time I figured out how to think about this, it was months into it. So now, should this happen again, I know how to think about it. But I mean, and that was hampered everybody, even people in charge of things, which I've never been in charge of anything. But the fact that people respond so emotionally to everything, is really to the detriment of society.
My last question, because I would love to have a conversation, endless conversation with you, but my last question is, what is the message you would like to send out to the young journalists who start their career right now with a lot of dreams, a lot of hopes, sometimes a lot of planning of what they're going to do in their future? What is your advice from your wisdom perspective?
I mean, there's certain jobs in journalism, I don't know how they get people to do them. The people that I see, or read about, who are in places where there's wars, where there's earthquakes, and my whole life I've thought this, I've thought, like, how do they get people to do this? I am way too cowardly to ever have been involved in anything like that. I have a tremendous amount of physical cowardice, more than the average person. There seem to be a lot of people willing to do this. There seem to be, there's two ways, there's more than two, but, among the ways that people can respond to danger like that is either to be terrified and say, no, you go, or to think this is an important thing. I want to report on this. It's incredibly important. It's incredibly important that among the real job of journalists, which is to tell the truth, I'm afraid that younger people have to convince a lot of people this is the truth. Here I am, I'm standing here, here is this war going on, and half the country here says it's a fake picture. I mean, that is now a new job of journalism, is to convince people this is reality. To have to convince people that this is reality is a pretty daunting task, and I would say to these people, good luck.